Of kids, they're traditionally here because they haven't had good experiences in the traditional classrooms, and to try to take the approach where we're going to try to control so much of what they're doing and their behavior just adds on to the perception they have of school being a miserable place. And so when we do that, I think that we tend to trigger off a lot of the school is crappy alarms that exist within the kids, and we really make life difficult on ourselves trying to make connections with them.
So it's almost like they've had a narrative in their mind about what school is, and we simply reinforce that by coming at them heavy and further entrenching them in that posture of it's me against the school, us being the school.
Well, they feel they have no voice. There's no creativity. There's no, outside of the box thinking allowed in that method. And I think what we do here is just we open it up so much that when they first come, it's almost like they're just stuck because they've never been given the freedom of choice in their education.
What role do you feel like you play for these kids?
You get to go first this time.
Well, there's a lot of roles because with the background where our kids come from, they bring a lot of kind of outside anxiety and we do our best to help the whole child, right? The whole student, not just learning their math and science and English, but actually helping them as a whole person and life skills. So, sometimes you're sort of boss and teacher, and sometimes your mom, and whatever that student needs on an individual basis, or counselor, whatever that looks like, you're meeting the kid where they're at in that spot right then.
I think we're like the person on the boat leading a person through purgatory, and we're guiding them from this convoluted, crazy reality through a bit of a hellish transition into the next phase of their lives, and it is whatever they need.
Really what you're getting at is what we've all seen is that we tend to be the most stable force in many of these kids' lives.
That's sad.
Especially for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I can imagine somebody watching this that works at a comprehensive saying, well, that's just different over there at Confluence, which it is to a certain extent, but what of what we do in terms of all the relationships we establish and the nature in which we interface with our students, what of that can be applied in a comprehensive setting in your mind?
I'll start with this one. I think the key is in having conversation with our kids. This is what comes through, is seeing the individual student as an individual can still be done on the comprehensive models. And the teachers that they mention to us when they come over here of being positive teacher experiences are the ones who have been able to recognize them as the individual and not ostracize them for being different than the pack. So just being able to see them as that individual, to learn what their strengths and their wants are, and to mold those strengths and wants into a way that they can still approach the curriculum in hand, while as not making it a take it or leave it approach.
Yeah. You made me kind of think along, like so many of our students talk about how their very humanity felt judged by the teacher because they hadn't completed work, and they felt like it was an indictment of their character because they weren't being what they felt was obedient. And so it's the idea of maybe separating that, like, while maybe you haven't done exactly what I want you to do, I still see you as a human, as a person, as somebody with needs and wants and tons of baggage.
And who's trying
in
right?
their own way.
Yes, and it's not the same trying as everyone, but being able to recognize that effort and acknowledge that effort is so important, because they will start coming around if you can acknowledge that, and start building on it, you know, and don't pay attention to the percentage, you know, that's not the important part, but it's the growth, right? And that's where you can still make a lot of progress in that child's life.
One last piece of advice that you might give for a new teacher in our district related to not the technical sides of teaching, but more the relational sides of teaching.
Your turn to go first.
I would just say take the time to get to know your students. Like once you foster that relationship, that student is going to be much more willing to learn and participate in your class because they know that you genuinely care about them. And if you don't, you're going to lose the kid.
But I have my curriculum to get through. I only have a set period of time. I have from August to December to completely tackle everything here. I don't have time for that relationship building.
What do you think about that, Jim?
If you don't have time for relationship building, you're going to end up losing way more students than's acceptable. So then you start going, what's the acceptable number of students to lose? And there isn't really any, you know. And so I understand that the comprehensives are dealing with the curriculum that we have the freedom of not having to deal with. And that's something that I'm very cognizant when we're talking about this. But still, I would say that you need to take the time to build the relationships. You need to take the time to find out what drives those students, and you check in on them, right? Because that's genuine. You don't just do a survey at the beginning that says what are your interests and then you never check in on it. You know,